This is the 3D VIEW-MASTER story Tom Thumb. VIEW-MASTER Reel 1. Picture 1. It's a stormy night. In a poor woodcutter's cottage, a seventh child is born. Another boy. Mother puts the baby gingerly into father's big hands. What tender looks the happy parents cast at their newborn baby. They are filled with wonderment at the child's size. "He's no bigger than my thumb," says the woodcutter. "Let's call him Little Thumb." "Tom Thumb would be better," says his wife. Picture 2. 7 years pass, and the country is struck by a cruel famine man, and animals search for food. The woodcutter's family is in desperate need. Tom's father is really at his wits' end. He hurries to the king's palace. A week ago he supplied the court with a parcel of firewood which hasn't been paid for yet. However, the king's treasurer doesn't feel at all sorry for him. On the contrary, he is very much provoked by the poor man's claim and, pointing to the dead rats that have been gnawing at the king's food supplies, tells him to be about his business. This is too much for the poor woodcutter. The only thing he can do is to return to his hut. His hands are empty, his heart filled with despair. Picture 3. But even kings have their sorrows. This king has but one child, his darling princess Rosamund. The king and queen take great care of their little daughter. She's the apple of their eye. Every night the queen gets up as many as 3 times to see whether Rosamund has been carefully tucked in. During the day, the princess is never left alone by her parents. And when one day she loses her kite, the whole palace is thrown into confusion, and all the king's men are ordered to go into the forest and look for the missing toy. Picture 4. Here's Tom Thumb again. He's playing by himself in the forest. Since he's such a tiny chap, his brothers don't have much to do with him. Suddenly, Tom is startled by footsteps. With a firm leap, he plunks into a ditch. Scarcely a few paces from his hiding place, he sees one of the king's soldiers shouting at his fellows. "That blasted kite! It's nowhere to be found," while the armed colossus disappears behind the bushes. Tom stays safely hidden in the ditch. Then he discovers a thin string hanging down from a beech tree. Bright colors shine up among the dark green leaves. As quickly as a flying squirrel, Tom climbs the tree, and in less than no time he gets hold of the toy. On one of its sides there is a golden crown, so there can be no doubt. Tom has found the princess's kite. Proud of his lucky find, little Tom hurries to the castle. Picture 5. The night comes quickly, and soon the whole palace is immersed in peaceful rest. Even the queen is caught in a deep sleep. She lies on a steadily star-shaped bed. How pale and beautiful she looks! Quiet sleep has wiped away all the sorrows from her face. Silver and crystal show their pale luster in the dim light of flickering candles, whilst hangings of the finest blue silk enclose the state bed like motionless guards. Picture 6. The only one who cannot sleep is Princess Rosamund. She sits in front of her window, staring into the dark, distant forest. It is as if she were dreaming of the missing kite. Suddenly she jumps on hearing a sudden rustling on the garden path. Her eye is caught by the sight of a singularly tiny boy down there in the moonlight. Rosamund slips quietly out of her chamber. Standing in front of Tom, she is so overwhelmed by happiness that she presses his little head to her cheek. To express her thanks for finding her kite, she shows him her lovely garden. See how they walk hand in hand on the soft green moss. Tom Thumb is speechless in admiration as she shows him the flowers with all their splendor of shape and color. There are exotic birds buzzing in a golden cage. It takes a long time for Tom to admire toys he has never seen before. Out of this fairy garden rises the white marble palace. Its silver and golden spires pierce the sky. Tom looks at the fairy princess. She holds the string of her kite. "Will you be my playmate?" she asks. Tom doesn't fail to nod yes as convincingly as he can, for, quite honestly, he is as pleased as Punch. Picture 7. However, Tom's happy time with Rosamund won't be long in coming to an end. At home his family are hungry and miserable. His poor wretches of brothers are so hungry that they fight even over a crust. One night Tom hears his parents quarrel about what they're going to do. They've made up their minds to abandon their children in the forest. "I can't bear to see the boys starving to death in my own home," he hears his father say in a whispered voice. His poor mother's eyes are filled with tears. The next morning the woodcutter's family make their way to the forest. Father marches in front of them, a glittering axe rubbing his right shoulder. As he leads his wife and children along narrow wood paths, they've a lot of difficulty in following the track. Tom Thumb lingers some distance behind. VIEW-MASTER Reel 2, Picture 8. Tom has filled his pockets with plenty of white pebbles. Cautiously he now and then drops a pebble on the path. It is a long and painful march. The children have a lot of trouble in keeping up with their father's sturdy steps. Tom can hear his brothers gasping for breath. Now they're passing a pond. Tom lowers his head and carefully drops another pebble. After marching all day, the father and mother suddenly disappear. The boys roam about, the dark forest echoing their crying and mourning. Only Tom doesn't cry. He searches the paths in the wood, finds the pebbles, and brings his brothers safely back home. The woodcutter and his wife are very glad to see their children again, for by this time they've reached some money from the king's treasurer, and mother has prepared a delicious meal. They enjoy the food as if it were a royal banquet. They'll become a happy family again, and soon a quiet sleep will bring them comfort and peace. Picture 9. Disaster continues to threaten the poor people in the cottage. Scarcely a week has gone by, and it's the old song again, quarreling over dry bread. One morning the woodcutter decides on another march to finally put an end to this woeful form of living. Lacking any pebbles, Tom Thumb has saved up his crumbs, ready to drop them now and then. As soon as they reach the middle of the forest, the children are told to scatter among the bushes. in search of dead wood. However, when it gets dark and the boys regroup with their bundles of sticks, their father and mother are nowhere to be found. The brothers are eager to return home, though, for little Tom will lead the way again. But no sooner do they arrive at the silver birch, where Tom dropped his last crumbs, than they are struck with horror. They see little birds fly off, clattering their wings. They have finished off every last one of them. Picture 10. After a terrible night in the forest, the most terrible night they've ever spent, Tom Thumb climbs a tall poplar. He can hardly suppress a whoop of delight as the faint outlines of a mansion loom up on the skyline. The children are worn out and starving. It's hard labor for little Tom to break a way through the brushwood. The house is surrounded on all sides by a rocky wall, so the boys give each other a hand up in order to scramble over to the other side. When they fall on their feet, they realize that they have arrived in a gigantic orchard. There are prune trees bending with ripe fruit and pears as big as a child's head. The boys are excited. They don't know what to look at first. Their eyes are caught by enormous peaches, which make their mouths water with appetite. They are enchanted by low shrubs glittering with ravishing berries. Like greedy animals, the boys throw themselves upon the fruit. Prunes and apples are nibbled till all of a sudden the feast is disturbed by the appearance of a giantess. Luckily her glance is not malicious. She tells them that they can fill their pockets with fruit, but warns them that after that they'd better take to their heels. "Didn't you know that this is the man-eater's territory?" she asks. In great haste, the boys make off, taking shelter under the brushwood. Picture 11. Tom and his brothers are swallowed up a second time by the dark forest. Frightened by howling wolves, they hurry along. There's nothing else for it but to return to the fearful house of the man-eater. They knock desperately at the gate. At first, the man-eater's wife is afraid. She cannot let them in. However, when she takes a look at those small, pitiful faces, she knows the boys are really done for. She opens the massive gate. Inside the horrible abode, the doors, floor and walls are all stained with dark red blood. The terrible bang of a door being flung open sends a cold shudder through the children's bodies. The giant is coming home. They can already hear his cursing. In great haste, his kind-hearted wife hides the 7 brothers from his greedy looks. 7 pairs of anxious children's eyes disappear below the heavy lid of a huge wooden chest. Lucky boys. They've escaped by the skin of their teeth. Picture 12. Just in time, the children catch a glimpse of the monster. His gigantic shape fills the entire doorway. The shuddering house resounds with devilish laughter. Red, sticky hair covers his coarse face. His awful teeth make a grating noise, as if someone were sharpening a saw. His heavy trunk rises out of his boots. A sharp knife dangles from his waist and rubs his fat belly. Triumphantly, he swings a couple of wild boars, which he's going to eat for supper. The shaggy brute with crimson blood. Picture 13. Here the giant and his 7 red-haired daughters are stuffing down the wild boars. Even the giantess becomes afraid. as she stands by observing their appalling gluttony. The man-eater falls into a nervous fit. He snorts with fury. Upbraiding his wife, he shouts in a roaring voice, "I smell human flesh." At the same time, a rude kick with one of his boots lifts up the wooden lid and, baring his teeth, the colossus takes the 7 boys out of the chest. The children throw themselves at his feet. Frightened to death, they cry for mercy. "I'm going to dish them up tomorrow," the giantess hurriedly intervenes. "They'll make a fine feast for our wedding anniversary." This mellows the man-eater, for he kisses his wife and says jokingly, "Tomorrow, that's all right. But, don't forget to fatten them up with cake and sweets." Picture 14. Lots of gigantic cakes are dished up, and soon the boys' hands and faces are stained with thick cream. While they are gobbling up the sugary confections, the man-eater's family stand by. They seem to wonder how these 7 little fellows are able to wolf down such enormous quantities of goodies. But Tom's brothers pay no attention to their mean looks. They've forgotten their woeful condition for a while. Only Tom is on the lookout for an opportunity to escape from those terrible teeth, and he slyly peers through his lashes. What on earth is going on in that tiny head of his? VIEW-MASTER Reel 3, Picture 15. When darkness falls, Tom and his brothers are laid in an enormous bed. They have to sleep in the same room as the man-eater's ghastly daughters. Those snoring frights wear small crowns on their red heads. Tom cannot get to sleep. Things are stirring in his mind. Silently, he steals away and searches the house. An open door leads into a damp cavern. 2 burning torches give it a bluish glimmer. He can see lots of human skeletons. Precious stones and costly garments are kept in good order. Struck with horror by the ghastly sight of this realm of the dead, Tom hurriedly makes off to his brothers. Picture 16. On his way back, Tom is alarmed by a pumping noise in the giant's bed chamber. The monster has got up. Through the open door, Tom can see the room bathed in a deep red glow. The giant is wearing an elegant nightgown. His fearful eyes wide open, he swings a flickering knife in anger. The madman is looking forward to the coming slaughter. As still as a mouse, Tom takes to his heels. Picture 17. The sun hasn't risen yet. The man-eater, though, is already fully dressed. But first he will quaff some barrels of wine. Heavy with the strong drink, he plumps down in front of the children's room. No one shall escape from his eager jaws. Picture 18. In the meantime, Tom Thumb has been substituting his brother's caps for the crowns worn by the giant's daughters. That was a narrow squeak, for the door is flung open with a terrible bang, and the monster throws himself on his daughter's bed, a knife in his hairy fist. There's a fearful beating and biting and guzzling until, finally satisfied, the brutish creature lies snoring heavily on his children's bed. As fast as they can, Tom and his brothers make off. But no sooner has the man-eater discovered his mistake than he jumps into his 7-league boots, and in less than no time he has caught up with the fugitives. Some of them manage to hide themselves in a rocky cavern. Only Tom falls into the grasp of the monster, whose swinging knife is already threatening his throat. The giant, however, is so drunk that he misses the little chap, topless over onto the ground, and, snoring like a pig, remains rooted to the spot. Picture 19. The giant is plunged into a profound sleep. His round belly goes up and down. That fellow won't wake soon, Tom thinks, and with a firm grip he pulls off the 7 leaguers. Putting them on himself, they turn out to have shrunk and fit wonderfully well round his short legs. Our little hero jumps pluggily across gloves and ravenous. Then he returns to the sleeping monster and kicks him with one of his boots. The giant wakes up with a start. Howling and gasping for breath, he runs after Tom, who tries to lure him to the rocks. Suddenly, near a ravine, the lumbering colossus stoops and, snatching at the little chap, topless over. Uttering a hoarse cry, he finally plummets down into the abyss. It doesn't take long before Tom's brothers come out of the cavern. Triumphantly they go in search of their parents' hut. Picture 20. The sturdy jumps of his 7 leaguers enable Tom to march in front of his brothers. Before you can say Jack Robinson, he finds the proper way. From now on the other boys accept him as their guide. Is it much farther, Tom? That was Reddy asking, and then someone at the back again. You can already see our house, can't you, Tom? Tom is very happy. Henceforth he will really be one of them. At home, father and mother have been on the lookout for hours. Their children's homecoming makes them weep for joy, and all day long the hut rings with shouts of delight. When the king hears about Tom Thumb's heroic deeds, he sends for the woodcutter and his family. Tom is made a knight. Picture 21. From now on, Princess Rosamund and Sir Thomas Thumb will be playmates for the rest of their days. Side by side, the fairy bride and bridegroom stride through cheering crowds. Happiness twinkles in their eyes as they make friendly waves in answer to clapping hands and fluttering handkerchiefs. Tom takes his dear Rosamund in his arms, which seem to have grown stronger. Then he lifts up one of his 7 leaguers and, pressing his sweetheart to his bosom, he takes a leap into the fairy space where tales never end.